Folks will talk about a time when they were young or they drank too much and they're like, oh yeah, I had to go to the hospital. I'm like, that's an overdose. You had a drug overdose. Okay, this might be a little spicy. If we destigmatized substance use so much and stopped exotifying and demonizing certain ones over others in this weird drug hierarchy, we would be able to really get a good lens of like, what is substance use?
We're talking to a woman.
Yep.
Her leg's amputated. She's still using Xylazine. A gentleman comes out of the tent in a wheelchair, missing leg. Her husband, also on Xylazine. If you fucking lost a limb, any normal person would stop using drugs. Drugs at some point take over the person's life, which is why harm reduction is needed.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the responses that just drives me crazy, let's send them to jail or prison.
We know that folks are statistically much more likely to experience an overdose death post-incarceration, and I had someone, they got inducted onto methadone, gets released, doesn't see any paperwork of what methadone clinic they're supposed to go to. I'm calling around, nowhere. I try to get someone to track them down, gone. What happens? Found in the park the next day.
Oh, geez.
The reality is you are not going to have long-term recovery if you are not.
Harm reduction has always had haters, but right now it's a full-on war, and when harm reduction is under attack, people die. The treatment first or treatment only crowd sells a nice slogan, but addiction isn't a switch you simply flip off. Treatment is important, but it often fails more than it works. And on average, people cycle through 4 to 8 programs before long-term recovery, and far too many people die along the way. What works is treatment plus harm reduction plus housing together. All of them together. Today's guest is Alixe Dittmore, Housing and Shelter Capacity Building Coordinator at the National Harm Reduction Coalition. We dig into what's working and what's failing and why shutting down services doesn't clean things up, it creates funerals. This conversation is urgent. If you care about your city and your neighbors, now is the time to fight for harm reduction. If you're on the fence, even better. Stick around and hear what actually keeps people alive and saves taxpayer money. Tell me a little bit about your organization.
So this is our 30th year. So we're celebrating our 30th year now. And it was actually founded in the Bay Area. I think their larger project there is the DOPE project. That's something that I think folks from around the area would know. They did a lot of SRO projects with naloxone access, tenant organizing, as well as training for overdose response. But it became bi-coastal, a big New York presence, but we are spread out everywhere. And for me, I fall under trainings, technical assistance, so we get a really, really cool job, honestly. We get to work with all different types of programs. People, individuals who want to start syringe exchanges, housing and shelter folks, folks that are doing maybe like social work or even medical, and they're like, hey, we need to learn more about harm reduction, substance use specifics, and trainings, capacity building, organizational building, and then a bunch of different conferences regionally, nationally, sometimes hopefully internationally. That is actually next week where a lot of our folks will be, and different publications and resources.
Yeah. It's one of my bucket lists to go to a harm reduction conference. I've never been.
Oh, well, you have to come to ours. But international is in Bogota next week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can't make it.
No, me either. But let me tell you, I wish I could. It'll be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's a strange time. Strange is a very political word there for harm reduction these days. For us, invisible people, we try to focus on harm reduction. We've done documentaries on Point. Mm-hmm. We just did one on managed alcohol program.
Yeah.
Basically because I saw in San Francisco the pushback of one trying to get started and then it was all canceled.
Yeah.
We've done some on Kensington. Insite in Vancouver is my favorite place in the whole wide world.
Insite's your favorite that you've been to so far?
My favorite because I felt unconditional love when I'm there. More so, I come out of a faith-based background. I was, one time known as a church growth expert, so I've been in lots of churches.
Yes.
But Insite, which is, for those of you that don't know, it's a supervised injection facility. It was the first one in North America. It's just amazing because you have clinicians, and then you have admin staff that run the place, and then there's peers who many of them are actively using. And what's really interesting is you can't tell who is who, right? It just blends in unless there's a heart attack.
Yeah.
And then the clinicians, go to help that person. But what was striking to me was there was a gentleman in a suit and tie, a business person who was there to shoot up. And there was a homeless man in a wheelchair that probably hadn't showered in a long time.
Yeah.
And they're both being treated with dignity.
The same way.
The same way everybody is. I did an interview. I didn't mean to talk about this, but I think it's important. Maybe I'll even link to the interview below where I talked to the gentleman who was running Insite at the time. And I was talking about what I felt was community and unconditional love. And one of the things we were talking about is like if somebody comes in with a pit bull, like the alarms don't go off. Yeah. Pitbull, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? They just love on the dog.
People have their pets.
And they love on the human. And it's all about community and helping people where they're at.
Well, ideally, that is how it's supposed to be. Like, I've had the privilege, of working in multiple types of harm reduction sites, and my last before here is a predominantly peer-based center. So the executive director is someone with lived experience, and I was able to work with tons of folks who had current living experience, which I appreciated you emphasizing, because I think a lot of times in this work, there is this overemphasis on folks who are already in recovery, and also having a very specific and narrow view of what recovery means. I know it's something that we've talked about before, which I'm sure we'll touch on, is how recovery looks different for different folks. And, it's at the end of the day, it's safer decision making, and that is a wide variety of things. But it's really supposed to be like that. And I feel like those programs are a lot more valuable when you have that because, as you know, the drug supply changes very frequently. So something that was out when I was in my stuff might be very different than what is happening now, 10 years later, even within 2 years, like just it rapidly changes. So having that is invaluable. And I know that you know this, and from the work that you do, you get a lot more from it. And it's also more fun. It tends to be way more fun and interesting.
You mentioned lived experience, your own lived experience.
Yeah, so a mixture of it, right? And see what I would share.
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing, and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you. You mentioned lived experience, your own lived experience.
Yeah, so a mixture of it, right? And see what I would share. So I grew up originally, before moving to the East Coast, in Northern California, Lake County. And the reality is, it was the early 90s, and there was a lot of meth use, a lot of substance use. I had substance use in the household. So I grew up with that. I grew up in a community having a lot of friends where almost everyone had it, whether it be a parent or a sibling, directly touched by incarceration, certainly by chaotic substance use, as well as poverty, like we talked about, right? The biggest thing, non-affordable housing. So growing up in that environment, and then to be frank, having my own experiences with really unhealthy, chaotic substance use, following some Rough stuff. Definitely self-medicating. It worked for me for a period until it didn't.
Right.
And it certainly opened the door for me. Like for me, harm reduction worked, and I was able to learn that this is a much grayer area than we've been allotted, right? And I don't identify actually as someone like, quote, in recovery. And it's not because I like still use drugs. It's just because I think about substance use as a spectrum that you can also interact with. I don't have the same relationship with substances that I did a decade ago. And I'm allowed to have that differing experience. And of course, folks can identify however they want, right? But don't force that on me because that doesn't feel as like authentic. I know folks who had it a lot more rough than me, right? Not to diminish my own, but nonetheless, it's a wide spectrum. And I think that harm reduction is very cool for that because you're able to then talk with folks and realize that their substance use is often a wide spectrum. How many folks will talk about a time when they were young where they drank too much and they're like, oh yeah, I had to go to the hospital. I'm like, that's an overdose. That is an alcohol overdose. You had a drug overdose. And you find that to be so far removed from like any other type of thing. And it's like, actually, no, if we destigmatized substance use so much and stopped exotifying and demonizing certain ones over others in this weird drug hierarchy, we would be able to really get a good lens of like, what is substance use?
In the same direction that you're going, and you opened up a topic, I have a friend, I don't think they got into one of those tiny shacks, so I don't think they're continuing to do this, but when they had a tent and they're living under the bridge, his wife shot up about 40 people a day. She was basically a supervised injection tent.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought it was wonderful because she was good at it, shouldn't shoot up alone, and people were coming to her to help. And I thought it was just wonderful. So I look at the peer model, and we focused on Point. We did their clinician model and their peer model. And I think they're both valuable.
Yeah.
But what I like about the peer model is that I believe it's probably has a better chance of being replicated because there's lower cost, because it's peers. And in fact, and you guys might already do this, I know there's a lot of people that do training. We've wanted to do videos to help people that are actively using, how to stay safe.
That would be beautiful. I'm thinking of a million types of programs that would be great for something like that. Because like I said, that was my personal experience, was getting to work at a program where most people were folks with either previous lived experience or current living experience. And it had, of course, unique needs, unique issues that would arise. But at the end of the day, I got to say, it became very apparent very quickly that we were reaching folks with services who absolutely did not engage in services, had a lot of distrust and mistrust, but they saw themselves in the staff and they knew the staff. Some of them had pre-existing relationships because though it was the capital of the, where we lived, nonetheless, it's still small in some ways. So people know each other. Like that's a community in of itself. People know each other and they remember each other. And it just allowed for way more meaningful services. And I also think it really helped with a lot of different equity issues that we have with who gets services, who actually accesses them, and so on and so forth. But I'm very, very big proponent of the peer model for sure. And also, though it is cheaper, making sure that we're supporting peers and really wrapping around them because they have unique needs in this work.
Right.
Like I think a lot of times people are thrown into this work where part of the job is your lived experience, and navigating that is very difficult because work boundaries and harm reduction and social services is very difficult already. Like you're working with people who, if you're lucky enough, you build enough rapport, you get to know them, and it's an intimate relationship. And like, yes, professional boundaries, but also we're human beings and you're connecting in a deeply human way. Now, if you have a personal relationship with them from before, or you have something where you've lived through that, it's different. And I just see a lot of peers kind of hung out to dry where they're not given the supports and training that they really need to like have, a robust upward mobility as well as like wellness in the work.
I have a thought on this. Because I've heard, not in the harm reduction space, just in the outreach space, as lived experiences become sexy now, right? So the peer model, back many years ago, I came out of a marketing world and then I ended up back in Los Angeles and I went, I was once homeless here. I care about homeless people. I'm going to go try to get a job in the homeless sector. I have experience with
Yeah.
homelessness. Nobody would hire me because they didn't hire people with experience of homelessness.
Yes, it's so different now.
Right. And now they hire people, and I've heard from different peers, because they're going out with social workers who often have no street sense. Just they haven't had the experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're bad people. They just are textbook.
Yeah.
And then the peers feel bad because the social workers are making a lot more money. And it's the peers that are actually engaging with the homeless people. So my theory on this, because I know a bunch of people that just were upset about it, is that organizations should figure out a way of training so that person could become a social worker.
Yes.
Or
whatever. Yeah.
Right. Licensed drug and alcohol counselor.
Or even like public health, things like that. Anything
Something,
like that.
as you said,
Yeah.
there's some upward mobility.
Yeah.
So that they could start making more money, if that's the path they choose, right?
That would cost more money, wouldn't it? And I think that's because I understand certain things, because the reality is harm reduction started it was started by people who use drugs, sex workers, by folks that started doing sexual health, drug user health liberation stuff. So it was already peer-based. Yeah. And then I understand in some ways when we need to try to get, let's say, insurance, when people want to make something billable, so then you try to have someone there. But like you said, my experience, honestly, especially in training facilitation, that's what I do full time. I'm often training folks who make way more money than me, and who, in my brain, when I first started in the work, I was surprised. I was like, wait, but like you have all these degrees, all the schooling that I don't have. I have all this imposter syndrome, and then I learned you just have a different skill set than I do, but I have a unique skill set that you apparently have not had access to whatsoever, and so it is valuable, and you're paid way less for it, or you're given what? I mean, luckily, if you get a job, but if not, otherwise, it's like, hey, tell us your story on a panel, and here's a bus pass and a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. Like a lot of that. And it's like, well, you just bestowed knowledge upon medical doctors.
Right.
Like you're increasing their care that they're able to provide now. And you got this little thing and like no help with like any vocational skill building, like you said. I would love to see something like that.
So you just brought up something, and I'm going to rant a little bit. It's very much related to the topic. And then we're going to talk about this recovery first stuff.
Okay, yep.
We went out with a street medicine team here in Chicago.
You did get to go out, so how did that go?
We did. Wonderful, wonderful doctors, wonderful team, everything else. And this is not really reflective of the one organization because it's very common. The Dunkin' Donuts gift card, the McDonald's gift card. I like to compensate people. Yeah. In fact, if we do a full documentary, I pay an actor's day rate plus $100.
Thank you for that.
I'm very adamant in that, and then, we compensate with cash. But there's this big fear, well, they'll do drugs. I mean, last year I gave a homeless man $54,000. He bought an RV for himself. He bought an RV for the woman in a tent in front of him, and he bought a very nice van for the woman across the street that was living in a tent because she didn't want an RV. And that is how he spent the money. So anyways, we're out on the street. People are using Xylazine. They're in wheelchairs. They are missing legs. They have abscesses on their legs, hard to walk.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no McDonald's even close.
No.
Right? And they can't get to it.
No.
And even one person asked, well, how much do you think I could sell this for? So in this thinking that if you give them a fast food gift card, they're not going to buy dope with it. It's just not realistic and practical.
No.
And when I was an addict, I needed dope. I needed to get high more than I needed air. Because if I didn't get high, I got dope sick. Yeah. And if I got dope sick, I'm vulnerable. And if I'm vulnerable outside, I might not make it another day.
Yeah. That's something that I have found to be probably like the hardest thing for people to grapple with when you're talking about harm reduction in a very plain sense. Because, of course, there's a lot of things that get thrown at people who work in this field about ideas, honestly, a lot of misconceptions about like what the work means. And I think just also this ethical aspect that for me, maybe because of my differing lived experiences growing up and then personally, it made it not so hard for me. But that is true for some folks where it's like it's hard for folks to see like this is my priority. And it doesn't mean that I don't care about other things deeply, but this is doing something for me that all of these other things do not do. You know, this works for me in this way right now. Maybe it doesn't after a while for certain folks, you know what I mean? But nonetheless, I think that people really grapple with that. And the gift cards thing is never ending. I do know that for certain funding, of course, you can't do cash. You have to do a gift card. And so I would say to people, get a good resale value gift card because folks, they need cash.
And whoever's the funders that is making that stipulation of gift cards doesn't really understand addiction or the population. It's not just them. We have an animation on it's okay to give money to homeless people. And we go into all the different ways. And, you know, I personally like the middle of the video where I say, you know, the soccer mom's hitting the bottle and the lawyer's hitting the pipe and, you know, that warehouse workers are doing a couple of, you know, pills to get through the day. And, you know, you have cocktail hour and that's all socially accepted.
How about Zoom during the height of COVID? We had Zoom happy hours for like organizations and businesses. People be like, yeah, that's how we're going to, we had alcohol, you know, liquor stores be an essential service. But yet the hierarchy, of course, of what's allowed, what's socially acceptable.
And I started by saying, you know, if you're going to the bathroom behind a McDonald's dumpster, you might as well have a beer. And I'm not advocating for alcohol or drug use. I'm just trying to put it in perspective that, you know,
imagine that's what like you have to maneuver. People have no idea what it's like to maneuver in that way, or have to.
Which gives a great segue to this recovery first movement, which scares the heck out of me.
Rapidly changing every 6 hours. So they were able to get an amendment change for the language where it had to be abstinence-based specifically, and now they're doing long-term remission, which I hope, you know, how like we've talked before about how recovery looks different for folks, hopefully that does allow, you know, policy language very specific on purpose to be enough vagueness to not be so based around that. But as we know, it was really, really hot debated. You had a lot of folks in recovery there who are very against certain services, right? And then you have folks who are in recovery also who are very pro it. And then you have people who don't have any lived experience who have a lot of complex feelings. I think this work is particularly difficult for people because it makes you face and grapple with really morally gray areas head on. You cannot look away from difficult conversations and harm reduction and substance use. You have to be very, very transparent. Like we talk about radical love a lot. That is not easy. Radical love isn't just all sunshine and rainbows. It means tough conversations, looking at your biases, looking at if you're really projecting this worked for me, so it's got to be this way for someone else. And a lot of us with lived experience, we can do that sometimes because it's a journey. It's a journey.
It's hard for me to comprehend how people that once used drugs because they know it's not a switch. They know firsthand experience that you just don't walk into a treatment center and get sober. One of the gentlemen we ran into the other night whose leg probably is close to needing amputation said, I have been in more treatment centers than I have fingers and toes.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the reality is these treatment centers, and I'm not saying there's not a place for it because I've seen it be successful for some. However, if you're looking at statistically speaking, very, very, very low success rate of actual long-term abstinence and change. So people who operate through syringe service programs, if you're a program participant of syringe service program where folks can go get their supplies, you know, harm reduction based, you have 5 times more likely to enter some form of treatment, and that could be the golden best thing ever, which would be medication-assisted treatment, preferably methadone. But nonetheless, it can be different sort of programs depending what you want, but they're more likely to engage in that. And it's just interesting how we keep pushing this when we say recovery first places, sending folks to treatment. When one doesn't really work like that.
It doesn't exist for the people that voluntarily want to go into it.
That's what so many times where I've had folks where that is what they want to do. You know, Alex, can you make a call for me? Absolutely. I call and there's nowhere to go. Or you go there and then you're released what? To the street? You're released back to your encampment?
Right.
How is that setting you up for success really at all? It's truly not. So it's astounding to me that we think that that's going to be successful because for decades it has proven that it is not successful. And I think, again, it's this misconception of harm reduction that we don't help folks in other ways, you know?
I believe it's fueled often by people that just want homeless people gone.
Yeah.
And they think that this is the political wedge that could get them what they want.
Yes.
Because the public falsely believes that addiction is a leading cause of homelessness when it's lack of affordable housing, and they just want these people gone. And then you have the faith-based community that's running gospel rescue missions and shelters. They're threatened by housing, and a big piece of this is the recovery first movement doesn't support housing.
Yeah.
And because it's treatment plus harm reduction plus housing has the best outcomes.
Yeah.
Those of us that are, supporting harm reduction, we see that and we support recovery. But it's the recovery folks that are against harm reduction and housing.
I've worked with, many of
For those of you listening, I'm hitting my head because it doesn't make sense.
So it, for me, doesn't make sense personally because it wasn't hard for me to get it. I was skeptic at first, and then honestly, I just listened and went, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I got to hear different perspectives, as well as if you take even emotion or thought or moral out of it, it makes more sense financially. It makes more sense public health wise when you're talking about reduction in bloodborne infections, talking about Xylazine. I'm from the East Coast. I've seen really, really horrific wounding where we're talking about amputations, wounding. God forbid someone also has diabetes or something else, which makes things even harder to heal. There's a lot of complications. But yeah, you got a lot of folks that really can't handle someone else's experience being different. And I think what happens too is, okay, this might be a little spicy.
Spice it up.
I think I was talking about this yesterday. Something that rings for me is when the folks say this is enabling, drug enablism kills. I think you give a lot of people a lot of power over your life as opposed to power over your own. Because the reality is you are not going to have long-term recovery if you are not totally in control of that. If you're telling me that someone doing something enabled you to continue making a choice, there's a difference between exploitation and when people are, setting you up in abusive situations in order to be exploited where you don't have a choice. But I'm not making you do something. You're not telling me that me working a syringe exchange doing street outreach is making you continue using. Yeah. I am hopefully offering you tools that you choose to take to have safer choices while you figure out what you want to do. But if this is going to work, if this is really going to work, you have to do it long term. And that's hard. So that's something I see a lot, particularly in San Francisco, the language that's used with that with recovery folks. And to me, it just feels like you still got some hurt around what happened, and it's okay for you to need something different than someone else. Yeah. And you don't have to totally get it to respect that some people need something else. And it doesn't mean that we can't give it to them. And also it's an evidence-based intervention that works. It's not just fluff and love. And I think a lot of people think it's just, what's wrong with loving on people? But two, they think it's just all this fluffy love, no rules. And it's no, it's tough conversations. It's being loving with people, yes. Yeah. But, being real with them and helping them get resources.
So I'm going to continue the spicy. And again, back to the other night, we're talking to a woman.
Yep.
Her leg's amputated. She's still using Xylazine, even though she lost the leg. All of a sudden, a gentleman comes out of the tent in a wheelchair, missing leg. Her husband, also on Xylazine. If you fucking lost a limb because you're doing drugs, any sane, normal person, you would think, would stop using drugs. This should show people that drugs at some point take over the person's life, which is why harm reduction is needed. Because this couple, who are a wonderful couple, both lost a leg, and forcing them into treatment is not going to do shit.
Yeah. They need
not at all. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is just so frustrating to me. And there's, I don't know if you want to call it an industry or, you know, there's, you know, especially in San Francisco, these people that are pushing recovery only.
Yeah.
And it's a death sentence to people. Yet they lie and say, oh, this is the only way. Everybody's got to do it our way. There's not even,
That's not how it works for anything.
Right.
You know, like to me, I always say, I try to make cute things when you facilitate, right? Say things different ways. And I'm like, harm reduction is a charcuterie board. I love to eat. So like there's a whole bunch of different things on it and you pick what you need. And like you're talking about with recovery, that's something that has frustrated me personally because recovery and harm reduction are not these like separate entities. They're not supposed to be. Like that is within it. For some folks, they decide, you know what, the safest thing for me is actually to abstain. I know people that are full, like very, very, very straight edge. I'm talking no mind altering substances, no caffeine, like no excess sugar. Like they really don't do any of that.
those people exist.
Other people sometimes
Our producer doesn't drink coffee. I don't know how.
So you know what I mean? Things like that. Then you have some folks that maybe still smoke cigarettes. Others that maybe, you know, they smoke a little bit of cannabis or alcohol wasn't their drug of choice. So it's like, oh, I can have
California
champagne.
sober.
Yeah. You can have like a glass of champagne at your friend's wedding and you're not worried. You know, it's not a problem for you. You're like, that was okay. I can do that. And I think that people forget about a spectrum of drug use because like you talk about, right, in your work and your lived experience, we see a lot of super chaotic drug use. In my work, I worked in street outreach, right? I saw a lot of super chaotic drug use where we were talking about. It is overtaking basic needs, overtaking, like prioritizing your health, making sure that you're okay like that. Yeah. And I think that because that is the most visible form of substance use, we also then see substance use as only that, when that's not the majority of people who use drugs that end up like that. However, those are the folks that are of the most high need of these multidisciplinary services approaches. And when we have recovery only, we really do a disservice to everyone because one, you're going to hurt your own feelings if you think that everything's going to go like that. You think everyone's going to go into abstinence-based recovery. You're talking the minimum times that folks would enter.
Oh, it's good for the Salvation Army and the faith-based shelters that everybody goes into abstinence-based in their Bible study programs because that's what it's all about for them.
Yeah. And the thing is, you know what? I want people, of course, let's be real. We all want people to think how we think, right?
Yeah.
And I work with folks all the time who don't agree with me. So even if you don't fully agree with it, I want you to at least know that you don't have to where you can create these services for other people. Don't prohibit other people from doing services that you're not personally able to provide. But also don't call yourself like, particularly Housing First, don't get me started on my rant. We say we're a Housing First program, and then you tell me, okay, you get a denial of service for this. We don't offer any of these wraparound services. That's not Housing First. Everyone's being set up for failure. It's supposed to be a very robust wraparound service. It's very intensive, and everyone gets set up for failure when you don't fund programs to have that, staff the people to be able to handle that, train them and support them well enough to support the program participants and tenants. And then, like we talk about for peers, upward mobility for tenants. Yeah. You know, I worked at a place where we had like kind of a tiered-based employment program for our program participants who were trying to figure out a little bit of readiness, come through a little stipend work, and then we go through an ambassador program, and everyone had that upward mobility. Yeah. But most programs don't invest.
They don't understand people use drugs to escape pain. And then by using drugs, it creates more pain. And, you know, it's a cycle. And their response is, this one drives me crazy. One of the responses that just drives me crazy is, let's send them to jail or prison. And one, there's drugs in jail and prison. There's a lot of overdoses.
Yes, there is.
And now when they get out, even if they got sober, when they get out, they have a prison record that will, you know, make it harder to get employment. If there's family involved and somebody goes into jail, it hurts the whole family. So this thinking of, oh, let's just lock them up. They got sober in jail. And some of them, well, I got sober in jail, so everybody. No, you were in jail for 6 fucking months, Tom Wolfe.
Yeah.
Come on. Jesus Christ. Right?
So quick anecdote about that specifically. I had someone.
I was fighting that. Sorry.
No, don't apologize, because it's frustrating. People politicize something where it's like, particularly when you're in this work, when you've had this lived experience. I mean, I'll be frank, I'm not in direct care full time for a reason. There is so much exponential loss, and then people politicize and demonize and bastardize the loss that you experience. They demonize the people that you lost anyway, and it's infuriating. It's like mind-numbingly so. And you talk about incarceration, and we know that folks are statistically much more likely to experience an overdose death post-incarceration. And I had someone, program participant, got incarcerated, locked up for something quick, right?
Yeah.
And then it ended up being a little bit longer, but they got inducted onto methadone while incarcerated. That's wonderful, right? Now what happens? Gets released at the end of the day, looks through the discharge paperwork, doesn't see any paperwork of what methadone clinic they're supposed to go to. By the time they get to me at the drop-in center, I'm calling around, nowhere. I think, okay, who can I get to do an emergency dose? He's pissed off, leaves while I'm on the phone. I try to get someone to track him down, gone. What happens? Found in the park the next day.
Oh, jeez.
Like, so even when we can't, even when we try, if everyone's not on board, you're going to keep having folks that are lost with that. And we see that a lot, like you said, with incarceration, and then also where are folks released to? Anyway.
Hey, I want to make it clear, I support recovery. I even support faith-based organizations if they have a year-long Bible study, as long as vulnerable people are not coerced into that.
If you want that and that works for you.
If somebody says, gosh, I wish I could go to a year-long Bible study, great.
And that's what works for you, then cool.
Yeah, but withholding basic needs from vulnerable people to get it drives me so crazy. But I support recovery.
Yeah, of course.
It's important. I support treatment. But again, treatment plus harm reduction plus housing is the best outcome. So if you really care about people, if you really care about stopping addiction, it's treatment plus harm reduction plus housing. It's all three. Not just one of them.
Exactly. And we see that also with housing. You know, well-intentioned programs where it's like, we want to get people housed. Absolutely. And are you prepared to house folks that have unique needs? Because one thing that we see, and San Francisco particularly had this issue, folks that were in an SRO were 19 times more likely to die of an overdose than folks who weren't in an SRO before they started the SRO project, which was with the DOPE project, part of my organization and a bunch of other ones. But nonetheless, that's the other thing too. Now we're just saying, well, you throw folks in an apartment and you should just be good. We're not wrapping around people to help them with life skills, living skills, that transition from going, especially if you're talking chronic homelessness, you've been outside for years, or you've been in an encampment where you've actually been, maybe like you had your own little tiny home. I've known many people who have like made their own, very nice, honestly, like good spots sometimes, right? But you're used to that, and now you're in your own room by yourself.
Right.
And that's just, you're supposed to be grateful. You're supposed to be perfect. Everything's supposed to like be great now because you have an apartment. And like you said, you have to have everything together.
Right.
You know, treatment, housing, harm reduction. They have to work.
The problem isn't housing first. The problem is the political and public will for the support services that go with housing have never been there. Or they are there in some communities, but it hasn't been implemented correctly. San Francisco is one of those communities, and the problem is the support services aren't there. Not that the program is bad.
Exactly.
It's that support services, and that is, there's no money for it.
Yeah. Because what do you have? You got Pathways to Housing, right, in Pennsylvania, and they have that success rate because they put the money in to have this program where they're like, let's see how it looks when folks are really wrapped around and given everything they need. And they saw exponential retention rates, you know, great stuff for medical things. There's a program, I think in DC, Community of Hope, and they were a family program. They had over 1,400 families. After the program ended, 99% retention. So when you like wrap around people and you really invest, you can do it. But like you said, that's not happening. And let's not even talk about funding cuts.
We did a documentary on Finland. We went to Finland.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
And the story that I love the most was, and we would have never told this story. The nonprofit brought this young man to us, and he was using.
Yeah.
So usually I do interviews with somebody that they could be a drug user, but they're not actively using at the time of the interview.
Which I've always appreciated.
Right. And that's just something for me. And,
making sure folks know what they're actually signing up for.
Yeah. There's informed consent and a lot of different things. But they brought this young man, he's 21 years old. The reason that he's doing drugs is that his friend committed suicide. But we went to his room and it is destroyed. Totally destroyed. Now, our producer said she'd never seen anything like it. For me, I lived in that room. I was that tweaker, just, so I'd seen it.
Yeah, you'd been in that space before.
Right. And it was so powerful because I asked the executive director. I mean, I already kind of knew, but I asked, what about this messy room? And she said that this man is no longer homeless. It could take months for him to get better, could take years.
Yep.
People don't just magically get better, but he has the best chance of getting better. And he was actually going into treatment.
Yeah.
And she ended by saying he is no longer homeless. So you have these people, San Francisco and other communities, they're bitching about the people outside.
Yeah.
They're bitching about the visible drug use. Which is horrible. It shouldn't happen.
People don't want to be using outside on the sidewalk.
And they're bitching about when they're inside.
Yeah.
Later, it's like the best, and it's just, they're just bitching.
Yeah. I don't want you outside, but I also don't want you inside safe. Not only do I not want to work there, but I don't want anyone who is equipped to do that work to do it either. It's huge. And I really appreciate that story because it forces people to look at the reality.
Right.
And the reality is stuff takes time. Most folks, especially when they first get into housing, right, not only you have a little bit of time, right? And then a few months later, maybe start having other stuff go down. And it's because you've been in survival mode. You've had so much other chaos going on. You now have a safe, stable place. You have support services that are wrapping around that can help you face certain things. And the reality is stuff takes time and people don't want to wait. They want you to go to jail and immediately get into abstinence-based recovery and to just let that be the thing that works. And again, for some people, I do know that that's their story, and I'm glad that they made it work for them. And a lot of people die when we force that to be the only way.
We kind of went off on the races, right?
We knew that would happen.
I had a feeling after our initial Zoom.
I apologize.
No, it's fine. We didn't even get to your paper here. There is a war on harm reduction. Anybody listening, what can they do?
It's super sensationalized, so I know that this may sound corny. The first things first, have tough conversations. I have conversations with people who do not agree with me all of the time, and I can't do it always. I'm a human being myself. I have my limits as well where I'm like, oh, I want to lose my mind. I can't believe you think that and you say that. But I try to go with curiosity of where is that coming from? Because a lot of times it's like, you don't like seeing people outside. Then we talk about safe consumption spaces. I don't like people having to use outside either. What about a safe space for people to be where we could also talk about reducing different sort of things? So those common threads.
And that's connected to detox and give them a path to recovery
whatever
and treatment.
You want. They do so many different things, and they're statistically much more likely to actually access those services if they have something like that, right? We see West Virginia keeps getting rocked on increase in HIV and Hep C because of the continued closures of syringe service programs, all of these different parameters. So what people can do, one, if you're like, I'm not in this work at all, have conversations at work, have more humane conversations with the people that you are in service to. If you're in any sort of direct services, that's for sure. And just get used to self-educating as well as advocating. You got to be able to, someone's got to be brave and speak up for stuff. Advocating to your boss, to the director, going to those town hall meetings, talking to people who are hollering at the other side with their mean signs that you don't agree with and going, what lens are you coming from? What about this is shaking you to your core so much where you came here during a work day and made this sign to say people shouldn't have these life-saving services? what fear around that can we work through? So, of course, as a trainer, I would say that, but also you got to get out and advocate. And you can do small things as well, like being a physical body, if you are able-bodied to do so, can be very powerful, particularly at like encampment sweeps, helping and offering people to help move their stuff if people are there, you know, and it's, be safe with it. Don't post all your stuff on Instagram. My Instagram, you know, warriors out here where like that's all of their armchair activism. I'm talking like go there, help people out, be safe, and yeah, have tough conversations with people, because if we're not talking about it, they're just going to keep saying no and voting it down.
So how do people support your organization?
So a multitude of things. Of course, you can always go to harmreduction.org. We have a donate. It's our 30th anniversary. We are a nonprofit, and whatever is donated allows for us to provide more training, capacity building, and opportunities for other programs that don't get funding. We're able to fill in those gaps. And also, to be frank, you can support us by attending our free trainings that we have virtually, usually once a month at least. We try to make it as accessible as we can. And also, more importantly, supporting your local harm reduction organizations, looking to see, is there something, how can I help out? You'd be surprised how much people can help when they think, oh, I'm not trained in this, whatever. It's okay. Yeah. If you've got a decent heart, an open mind to learn more, and maybe some resources, cash, like we talked about, you know, and also like goods to help folks, do that, but get involved locally as well. I love us. Please support National Harm Reduction Coalition, and more than anything, prioritize your own community.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much. This was very fun. Thank you.